I watched her documentary before she ever became big. I think I seen it on PBS, on Channel 13. You can tell she was a rough. She had anger problems. She was not ladylike. She was nigga boy, tomboy. Nah, and she, nigga, she went through the process and corrected what needed to be corrected to represent what a champ is. She ain't no Layla Ali. None of our new youth are what our old stars used to be. They got their own mind, they got their own identity. So nah, man, homie, they picking on Claressa. And can't nobody whoop her.
Y'all, steady yourselves, because what's coming next isn't gossip, isn't speculation, and sure isn't empty online chatter. This is the instant the illusion splits apart. Because when Charleston White finally spoke, he didn't shout, he revealed. And that quiet everyone mistook for devotion? It just transformed into the most deafening admission imaginable. Look, for years, the public was handed a flawless image. An untouchable winner. A golden couple. A fairy tale sealed in victories, wealth, and standing ovations. But Charleston White steps forward and calmly poses the question nobody else risked asking. What if it was never affection? What if it was calculation? What if it was leverage? What if appearance mattered more than honesty? He didn't attack with names. He didn't explode. He didn't chase clout. He chose something far more unsettling. He traced the lines. He reminded everyone that Claressa Shields didn't arrive polished and praised. She was fierce, guarded, unrestrained. And yes, she was molded not only into a champion, but into a product. A product that couldn't afford disorder. A product that couldn't endure scrutiny. And that's when the narrative turns cold. Because while lenses stayed locked on championship moments, something else was steadily steering things backstage: finances, optics, security, and influence. And standing there wasn't merely a lover. It was a handler. Someone whose quiet wasn't coincidence, it was intentional. Charleston White didn't charge. He didn't accuse outright. He did something colder. He allowed the sequence to speak. He allowed the quiet to speak. And suddenly, the union everyone applauded began to feel less like passion and more like a negotiated arrangement. Because when love is genuine, it doesn't demand this level of restraint. When love is genuine, it doesn't survive on this much quiet. And when love is genuine, it doesn't resemble a timed agreement written in fine print. And from that second forward, nothing about Claressa Shields and Papoose feels unchanged.
So Claressa Shields wants to have babies with Papoose while he's still married to Remy.
They gonna look like African kids, Ugandan babies. Yeah. They ain't gonna know if them babies Nigerian, Jamaican, or Haitian. But they gonna have some pretty chocolate skin. Don't know if their hair gonna be too straight or wavy. They may have African hair. But they sure gonna be nigga kids. Yeah. They gonna be some smart kids that know how to fight.
What made this moment so disturbing wasn't how loud Charleston White spoke. It was how exact he was. The restraint. The way his words landed like reminders instead of arguments, as if he wasn't persuading anyone, only resurfacing truths people chose to overlook. This wasn't an outburst. It was a reset. And once that reset took hold, the entire storyline surrounding Charleston White, Claressa Shields, and Papoose began to unravel quietly. Charleston White never questioned Claressa's ability. He questioned the machinery built around it. He didn't dispute her dominance. He scrutinized how tightly that dominance had been shielded. Because in his view, the most dangerous element in celebrity culture today isn't collapse. It's protection. When someone becomes too valuable to doubt, when questioning feels taboo, that's when influence turns invisible. He highlighted something many supporters overlooked. Claressa's ascent wasn't only about strength and discipline. It involved polishing, damage control, careful storytelling. Not because she lacked skill, but because the structure around her couldn't risk volatility. Audiences saw raw supremacy. What stayed hidden was buffering. Matchups selected deliberately. Threats neutralized quietly. A persona that appeared unfiltered, yet operated with intention. Then Charleston redirected attention, not inside the ropes, but around them. Toward those close enough to shape entry, sway perception, and enforce quiet. That's where Papoose appears, not as a love interest, but as a steadying presence in the public narrative. Not outspoken. Not aggressive. Consistently nearby. Consistently silent. The kind of figure who never demands focus, yet is never absent. Charleston White didn't claim Papoose controlled Claressa. He offered something more nuanced. He outlined a space where safeguarding and reliance begin to merge, where the one guarding you from backlash also becomes the barrier that keeps backlash away. In that environment, silence isn't accidental. Silence becomes structure. That's the point where the bond stops resembling affection and starts resembling coordination. Charleston implied this wasn't emotional. It was practical. Claressa required steadiness, legitimacy, and insulation from turmoil. Papoose required relevance, closeness to influence, and restored visibility. Together, they didn't merely appear powerful, they appeared secure. And in a world driven by image, security is value. This is also when Remy Ma re-enters the discussion, not loudly, but deliberately. Charleston White framed her absence not as chance, but as resistance to control. Remy Ma, in his assessment, was never someone who could be quietly managed. She pushed back. She disrupted framing. She refused silence in favor of confrontation. And when a system can't regulate a factor, it eliminates it. Charleston didn't allege conspiracies. He mapped behaviors. How some voices get elevated while others slowly disappear. How narratives shift not because facts change, but because usefulness does. And within this shifting landscape, Claressa wasn't only a boxer. She was property, an image requiring preservation at any cost. Midway through the exchange, Charleston White addressed the question flooding social media: why Papoose never spoke up. Why he never lashed out publicly. Why no former partner ever exposed him first. And that's when he delivered the sentence that silently altered everything.
Yeah, that nigga Papoose. And this is why I say that. You ain't never heard no hoe come out and say nothing bad about him first. Even when his hoe was doing wrong, he wasn't running to the internet bashing her. And he don't speak much. He's a man of silence, so that means his words are important to him. I done seen him get with 2 women. And it seemed like he brought the best out of both women. Yeah, I don't know too many niggas that yo hold their girl.
Quiet wasn't presented as purity. It was presented as control. And control, Charleston suggested, is often confused with virtue. When someone never responds publicly, people assume there's nothing to defend. But in truth, it can mean they understand restraint better than anyone else present. From there, the tone turned heavier. Charleston White started discussing what happens when success reaches its ceiling, but identity stops evolving. When attention wanes and closeness to influence becomes the quickest route back into visibility. He didn't claim Papoose exploited Claressa. He said opportunity naturally gravitates toward those prepared to receive it. And when 2 needs meet, protection on one end, access on the other, people label it love because strategy sounds colder. He pressed the idea that Claressa's orbit had gradually changed. Less centered on boxing, more centered on image, less about danger, more about conservation. And within that space, anyone questioning the shift wasn't merely disagreeing, they were endangering the framework. Charleston also turned his critique outward, toward the culture surrounding it all. He questioned why voices that preached empowerment went quiet when accountability mattered. Why media platforms echoed the same harmless storylines. Why criticism was waved off as envy or malice. To him, silence at that level isn't neutrality, it's participation. The longer he spoke, the clearer the design became. Control doesn't announce itself. It settles softly. It masks itself as safety, as devotion, as care. Until the person at the center can no longer tell where freedom ends and structure begins. Charleston White then delivered one of his most unsettling insights. That repeated bodily punishment, bout after bout, damage after damage, creates exposure. And exposure is when reliance becomes valuable, when the craving for steadiness surpasses the urge for autonomy. And those closest to you become essential, not because they strengthen you, but because life feels unworkable without them. He didn't outline villains. He outlined motivations. Then he widened the lens. This wasn't solely about Claressa Shields, or Papoose, or Remy Ma. It was about how contemporary relationships, especially public ones, are increasingly engineered like agreements. Who supplies value? Who provides cover? Who manages access? Who carries risk? And who gets swapped out when the equation changes? Charleston White closed this segment by redefining the entire discussion. This wasn't a romance gone sour. It was a partnership functioning exactly as intended until it hits expiration. Because when bonds are built on usefulness instead of faith, the breakdown isn't emotional. It's systematic. And the most dangerous detail? The truth doesn't detonate. It seeps. Gradually. Silently. And once it starts seeping, no amount of image control, publicity, or quiet can force it back in. What makes this chapter uneasy isn't what was spoken. It's what's suddenly aligned. Because by the time Charleston White reached this phase of his analysis, the focus had shifted beyond individuals and into systems. Not who these figures are, but how structures behave when influence, wealth, and image intersect. Charleston White didn't portray the relationship as messy. He portrayed it as streamlined. And efficiency, to him, is never sentimental. It's intentional. It's refined. It's built to minimize exposure and maximize return. That's the moment the bond between Claressa Shields and Papoose stopped feeling emotional and started feeling operational. He highlighted something quiet but damaging. When one partner manages access to press, to narrative, to dissent, they also shape reality. Not through pressure, but through filtering. What passes through, what gets softened, what never arrives. And the most unsettling part is that from the outside, it still resembles support. Charleston proposed that Claressa's surroundings had grown increasingly controlled. Fewer spontaneous moments, fewer challenging questions, more shielding disguised as allegiance. And in that setting, love doesn't vanish, it gets reassigned. It becomes leverage, security, coverage. This is where he shifted to finances, not desire, but design. Because when one partner earns far more, the audience rushes to label motives. Gold digger, leech, exploiter. Charleston White dismissed those terms completely, not to defend, but to refine. He argued the dynamic wasn't about taking wealth. It was about reaching wealth without obstruction. About being treated as though the assets are mutual, even when they legally aren't. That difference matters. Because it moves the discussion away from stealing and toward synchronization. And synchronization, Charleston implied, is the backbone of most modern power bonds. You don't need possession when you have influence. You don't need command when you have closeness. That's when he stopped and addressed the question everyone keeps circling, but few want answered plainly.
She also makes more money than him, similar to Remy Ma. So would you consider him a gold digger?
No. Player ain't never been a gold digger. That nigga's a player. Nigga, that smooth player, nigga. Yeah, now, man, now, you always supposed to play for the bank. My grandmama told me, if a woman really like you, it ain't nothing she won't do for you. Well, grandmama, how you know if she really like you? She'll give you her money.
That statement didn't hit gently, because it redefined generosity as evidence. Not coercion, but confirmation. Charleston wasn't arguing that money creates love. He was arguing that love reveals itself through access. And when someone moves freely through your resources without resistance, it exposes something about the balance of power, whether you're comfortable acknowledging it or not. From there, he pulled the camera back once more. Charleston White explained that the public's fixation on who earns more completely misses the real issue. The real issue isn't income. It's authority. Who controls the narrative? Who decides when quiet is necessary? Who chooses the moment to respond and the moment to vanish? Inside that framework, silence becomes leverage. He defined silence not as submission, but as calculation. Loud figures destroy options. Quiet figures accumulate control. And in a culture addicted to noise, the one who never reacts often becomes untouchable because there's no angle of attack against absence. This is where Remy Ma returns to the story again, not emotionally, but structurally. Charleston suggested Remy represented volatility. She spoke on instinct. She refused to polish conflict. She didn't soften tension for appearances. And in systems engineered around brand protection, unpredictability isn't passion, it's risk. So when the narrative moved away from her, it wasn't heartbreak. It was liability removal. Charleston White argued that the industry didn't merely allow the shift, it profited from it. Clean stories sell easier. Managed relationships defend themselves. And when dissent appears, it's immediately labeled bitter, jealous, or hateful. That reaction doesn't require coordination. It's built in. It's cultural. The coldest moment in Charleston's breakdown came when he addressed duration. He explained that arrangements based on usefulness don't collapse in spectacle. They conclude quietly. When value shifts. When protection weakens. When the asset no longer requires the same filter. That's when silence fails and exposure begins. And exposure doesn't request consent. He stressed that truth almost never arrives as one explosive reveal. It surfaces in pieces, in inconsistencies, in moments where behavior stops matching narrative, where loyalty feels less like devotion and more like obligation. Charleston White connected this directly to physical cost. Repeated bouts, repeated injuries, repeated recovery cycles. He argued that bodily wear increases emotional reliance. And reliance is where control becomes most efficient, not cruelly, but organically. Because when someone is exhausted, hurt, and constantly observed, they stop questioning the structure that promises peace. That's how systems survive. He ended this section by reframing marriage itself, not as fantasy, but as framework. Not romantically, realistically. He argued that many relationships collapse because people treat marriage as feeling, not architecture. As emotion, not design. And when emotion shifts, everything falls apart. In his assessment, relationships built like enterprises endure pressure. Relationships built like performances fail the moment the audience changes. And that's the last unease in this narrative. Because if this was never love, if it was alignment, then the silence wasn't disloyalty. It was protocol. And protocols don't explain themselves. They simply end when they stop serving a purpose. Charleston White didn't instruct the audience what to think. He didn't demand judgment. He outlined the mechanism and let the consequences sit. And once the structure becomes visible, it can't disappear. By the time Charleston White reached this point, the impact was already irreversible. Not because of accusations, but because of recognition. The story no longer belonged to Claressa Shields Papoose or Remy Ma as individuals. It had grown larger. A pattern. A system. A familiar conclusion people only recognize after it's underway. Charleston White didn't claim the relationship would fail. He proposed something colder. That it was never meant to endure. That it had purpose, timing, and an exit plan embedded from the start. And once that idea settles, moments that once felt romantic begin to read as transactional. He spoke about how celebrity relationships today are designed to absorb pressure, not emotion. They aren't built for honesty, they're built for optics, for headlines, for insulation against backlash. And inside that environment, authenticity becomes danger. Vulnerability becomes exposure. Silence becomes the safest asset anyone can hold. This is where Charleston's analysis turns surgical. He explained that public couples aren't evaluated by affection, but by efficiency. Who stabilizes the image? Who calms disruption? Who absorbs criticism without generating more? And once those calculations replace intimacy, the relationship is already operating as a contract, even without signatures. That's when expiration enters the conversation. Charleston White suggested that relationships like this don't implode publicly. They taper off privately. No dramatic announcement. No explosive scandal. Just distance. Delayed appearances. Carefully measured quiet. The same way corporations retire products they no longer need to defend. What makes it unsettling is how recognizable that process feels. He pointed out that the public often confuses longevity with loyalty. But longevity inside controlled systems doesn't signal commitment. It signals performance. It means the arrangement is still useful. Once it isn't, protection dissolves. Silence fractures. And what once felt untouchable becomes questionable. Charleston didn't forecast collapse. He explained inevitability. Because silence only holds power while people believe it means something else. And this is where the story stops feeling entertaining and starts feeling uneasy. Because when the noise fades, when clips stop looping, when defenses go still, what remains isn't hero or villain, it's pattern. Familiar. Polished from afar. Empty up close. What once looked like loyalty now resembles obligation. What once felt like protection now resembles control. And what was called love now carries the weight of an arrangement that reached its limit. This is the moment the audience decides whether silence still feels honorable or rehearsed. Because silence doesn't just protect individuals. It protects systems, agreements, narratives that survive only as long as the wrong questions stay unasked. And when those questions slip through, everything built on image begins to shake. There's a reason the story never closed cleanly. A reason answers arrived in fragments instead of confessions. A reason no one speaks too much, too fast. Because once illusion fractures, repair requires admitting what it was built from. Power, dependence, fear of irrelevance, fear of losing access, fear of losing control. That fear speaks louder than accusation. What makes this tragic isn't fallout. It's realization. The warning signs were always visible. Quiet exits. Filtered truths. Voices that vanished instead of being addressed. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives calmly, professionally, with planning and polish. So the question isn't who is right or wrong. It's who benefited while silence held. And who pays when the arrangement stops delivering. Because stories like this don't end when people stop talking. They end when truth no longer needs approval to exist.